Tender and wildly be thankful unto the Most High, Mother, Father, Creator of the universe, Kudzai, Mudzimo, Mokoro. Give praises unto our great ancestors, Abibi Fahondie, Abibi Tumi, African liberation and African power for all African people. Welcome to another edition of the Pan-African Question, where we break down answers to popularly asked questions about Pan-African theory, ideology, practice and strategies. Just want to say, give thanks for the feedback here on the first few videos. Keep it coming, keep your questions coming, your comments coming, and I'll try to respond to all of them in due course. As you can see, today's question is, why don't uno Pan-Afrikanists ever go to Africa? This is a popular asked question. One of the most popular asked questions. And even in saying that it's a popular asked question, I'm conscious of the fact that enough times when it's asked by people that are just anti-African or anti-Pan-African. They don't even like to identify themselves with their Africanness. And they because of that, they have an issue here with these Pan-African people, yeah, who are African-centered and look to Africa. And they want to try and find a reason, yeah, to discredit such people, such ideologies, and such sensibilities. And so they ask this question because there's a lot of us in the diaspora, right? There is a lot of us in the diaspora. And so even in spite of those intentions, those negative, bad mind intentions, this is actually a pretty good question, and exploring it is a good opportunity to provide some information. And so we're going to get into it right about now. The answer to the question is, in fact, that the question is based upon a faulty premise. It's not true that Pan-Africanists don't go to Mama Africa. In fact, as early as we have records, yeah, for Black nationalists, African nationalists, Pan-African sensibilities, we have records of Africans trying to repatriate to Mama Africa, or actually doing so. The majority of the early documented cases for this will be found in the auspices of the United States of America, yeah? And this is partly because Africans in America were operating as a minority, yeah, among a white majority, and the fact that you're dealing with an industrializing nation, and so which is developed more than a lot of other areas of the Americas at that time. So there's going to be more records to be found in that context. However, Africans throughout the Americas are known to be working together, you know what I'm saying, collaborating on their organizational efforts at this time also. Whatever the case, if you look into the traditions and the cultures of Africans in the Caribbean, yeah, and throughout the Americas, you're going to find folk stories and tales and songs, rituals, yeah, and spiritual understanding that all gives evidence, yeah, of this desire and this propensity towards returning and repatriating home. So in the 1700s, Africans begin to petition the colonial administration, as well as what would become the American government, for the right and the resources, yeah, to return back to Mama Africa. One of the earliest cases is in 1787, as led by Prince Hall and about 70 odd other African men, women, and children. They petition the American government, specifically as it stood in the state of Massachusetts at that time, for the right of return. The petition was written on behalf of a number of African blacks, and they spoke about the fact that basically they or their ancestors had been kidnapped, yeah, from Mama Africa. They had been enslaved in America, and in spite of the Declaration of Independence and the fact that some of them were freedmen, their living conditions were deplorable, yeah? So they began by laying out that context and went on to say the following. This and other consideration, which we need not here particularly mention, induce us earnestly to desire to return to Africa, our native country, which warm climate is much more natural and agreeable to us, and for which the God of nature has formed us, and where we shall live among our equals and be more comfortable and happy than we can be in our present situation, and at the same time may have the prospect of usefulness to our brethren there. Not going to break that down any further because it speaks for itself. You can see clearly what the intentions are, but just to say that this was one of a number of petitions. The earliest that I've come across goes back to 1773, yeah, which is interesting because that's before the American Revolution. All of those petitions, however, were unsuccessful. None of them bore any fruits, yeah? But the American Revolution did create an opportunity because Britain was trying to conscript Africans into the army, yeah, to fight against what would become the Americans, and what would become the Americans were conscripting Africans to fight against the British, yeah? Now, that created some opportunities because obviously you have to give incentives, right? And so some of the incentives was either freedom, yeah, from enslavement, and or returning to the African continent. So in the 1780s, yeah, the British create this colony called and call it Sierra Leone, and many Africans petitioned to return to Mama Africa. And because the British had control of Sierra Leone, they returned Africans to Sierra Leone. In 1792, 1,200 Africans made that journey, and tens of thousands of Africans made the same journey in the decades following. As far as the Americans are concerned, they became concerned by the fact that the Africans who they had freed, yeah, as a result of them either fighting in the war on behalf of America or having bought their freedom, basically were going to cause trouble, right? They were concerned about these free blacks, yeah, causing trouble and inspiring revolt, yeah, among the rest of the Africans who were still enslaved. And so they saw what Britain was doing, and they formed the American Colonization Society, and they create this colony called Liberia, yeah. And between 1822 and 1867, approximately 13,000 Africans make that journey and return to Mama Africa by way of Liberia. Now, obviously, there's a whole heap of contradictions here with these examples, especially in the case of Liberia. And all of those contradictions are based upon the fact that, one, the colonizers, yeah, were the dominant forces in making a lot of this happen. And two, because of the fact that centuries of enslavement, yeah, on the African continent had created some contradictions there too. So it's a very complex situation, and you can do your own research on that as you see fit. It is necessary to say, though, in spite of the contradictions, that many of the Africans who went back with sincere intentions and sincere sensibilities. Obviously, we're dealing with people that are either in or just coming out of enslavement. And so the resources, yeah, to be able to fund this themselves, yeah, was basically non-existent. And many of them saw the return to Mama Africa as an act of reparations. You've kidnapped us, yeah, you've robbed from us, you've enslaved us, you've pillaged, you've tortured us. A form of reparations is to pay for our return to our homeland. And that's the consciousness with which some of them, you know, went on that particular journey. One notable individual that was instrumental in inspiring Africans to return to Sierra Leone was a man by the name of Paul Cuffe, yeah, born of a Native American mother and a father from West Africa. We know he was Ashanti by the name Cuffe. Cuffe is an anglicization of the name Cuffe, yeah, which is an Akan name, all right? And so we know that his father was born on the continent and enslaved in the Americas. Paul Cuffe did not think, yeah, that Africans in America were ever going to be able to ascend into a high quality of life. And so he began to promote the repatriation to Sierra Leone among Africans in America. And in 1811, him and about 38 other African men and women actually resourced their own migration. They paid for their own trip, yeah, sailed by one of them, yeah, a captain, a black captain on a ship full of black people, went to Sierra Leone in 1811. So that's one of the earliest examples of a self-reliant and self-determined and self-paid for trip of repatriation to Mama Africa. One of the biggest fears that the European enslavers in the Americas had was the fear of the revolting African. And thankfully, many times, yeah, our ancestors brought those fears to life, yeah. Most notably in Haiti in 1804, and that sparked an inspiration throughout the Americas. 1831 in the United States, Nat Turner led a rebellion. And in 1835, yeah, one of the revolts that we don't know too much about, yeah, especially us in the English-speaking world, is a revolt that happened in a place called Bahia in Brazil. And Brazil had a monumental number of Africans enslaved in its borders, and has an early tradition of African nationhood as well, if we study Palmares and the various quilombos. But that's another subject for another time. 1835, yeah, in a place called Bahia, which was a hub for Islam, yeah, Africans who were Islamized, as well as Africans who had held onto and retained their indigenous African spiritual traditions, were in Bahia. Led a rebellion, yeah, in 1835 that scared the Portuguese to death, yeah. The rebellion was eventually quelled, all right, because of superior weaponry and all manner of different things. However, yeah, after killing off some of the leaders and imprisoning some, they were still so fearful, yeah, about the prospect, yeah, for more rebellion and an upheaval of the entire region of Bahia, and later spreading out to Brazil, that they acceded, yeah, to a demand in terms of returning hundreds, yeah, of Africans in Bahia back to the continent of Africa. And that over the years swelled, yeah, to thousands, yeah. And so you have what are referred to as Afro-Brazilian communities. It's a funny terminology because these are Africans that were enslaved in Brazil, but when they were back in Africa, they're called Afro-Brazilians, which is interesting. But yeah, you can find them in Nigeria, Benin, Togo, and in Ghana, they're known as the Tabom. Yeah, they're considered to be a group in and of themselves. They're called the Tabom people. So that's another example of Africans having repatriated in the 1800s. Fast forward to 1854, and a man by the name of Martin R. Delany, real bad man, is on the scene. He develops a thing called the African Emigration Convention. And these are Africans who are seriously discussing the prospects, the need, and the opportunities for migration of African people based upon the principle of African nationhood. In 1858, Martin Delany joins Henry Highland Garnet in the founding of the African Civilization Society. That was an important development because whereas the American Colonization Society that founded Liberia was again run by Europeans, yeah, largely with the interest of Europeans at heart, the African Civilization Society was run by Africans with the interest of Africans at heart. This was a completely black-led operation, and they did much, yeah, to separate themselves completely from the American Colonization Society. The Constitution for the African Civilization Society was written and had a few articles, one of which read, "The basis of the society and ulterior objects in encouraging emigration shall be self-reliance and self-government on the principle of African nationality, the African race being the ruling element of the nation, controlling and directing their own affairs." Again, not gonna go into it because it speaks for itself, but to move the story along, Robert Campbell, who is also a member of the African Civilization Society, joins Martin Delany in the formation of the Niger Valley Exploration Party. And in 1859, the two of them traveled to West Africa, and they spent about 9 months here traveling throughout West Africa. And the result of their travels is that they were able to sign a treaty with a group of Egba chiefs. The Egba are a subgroup of the broader Yoruba nation, yeah? And the opening of that treaty reads like this: that the king and chiefs on their part agreed to grant and assign unto the said commissioners on behalf of the African race in America the right and privilege of settling in common with the Egba people on any part of the territory belonging to Abeokuta not otherwise occupied. Robert Campbell, who's, by the way, Robert Campbell is from Jamaica, yeah? He stays among the Egba people, and he lived out the rest of his days in West Africa. Martin Delany returns to the United States of America to lay the groundwork for the actual people them that are going to actually repatriate, yeah? But he's met with some challenges that basically dead the program. What are those challenges? The first is the breakout of the American Civil War, which was really just a war between white people fighting for the right, yeah, to enslave African people. And so he considers it his duty to stay and protect African people in the United States of America. The second factor is the scramble for Africa. European nations were upscaling their encroachment upon African land. Invasions, wars have persisted. And in Abeokuta specifically, yeah, where Martin R. Delany and Robert Campbell had signed this treaty, among those chiefs that were there, the British had Christian missionaries that were operating, yeah? And it was considered that this particular treaty was against the interest, the colonial interest of Britain. And so those missionaries and those British officials basically agitated to dead the petition. Fun fact, however, one of the people that would have been around in Abeokuta in and around this time was the family and the grandfather, more specifically, of Fela and Nicolapo Kuti. We have Edward Wilmot Blyden and Bishop Henry McNeill Turner, who are also contemporaries of Martin Delany.